You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm George Cedarquist, joined this week by Oliver Camacho, Matt Cummings, Weston Williams, and Ashley Hardgrave. It's a full house for our last new episode of the year. All right, we're going to wrap up 2023 with the best and worst from Operaland over the past year, including performances, trends, passings, and that one thing you totally forgot happened back in February.
Too real.
Plus, we vote for the inaugural OBS Person of the Year. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast. Maybe that's going to be your New Year's resolution. You're going to go to Spotify and click follow. You're going to go to Apple Podcasts and
So much
hit
effort.
the plus sign. Maybe you're going to send us a voice memo and email us your hot takes.
Time will tell.
Mailbag@operaboxscore.com. You can even just record your thoughts using You Got Something to Say. That's the page on the website, operaboxscore.com. We want to hear what you think is the best and the worst of opera from the past year. However you contribute, it's going to be in the stocking or under the tree. It's going to be the OBS beer coaster, the OBS lapel pin, and the all-new #1 OBS fan foam finger, which was the office present here at OBS headquarters.
Tax
Oliver
deductible, baby.
Camacho, you have your foam finger, Oliver.
I do. Everybody thinks that they're going to subscribe or follow to podcasts in January. And then, you get to February, it's like, you know what? I'm just going to wait till next year to do it.
We've all been there. I think we should really start charging like a gym, where you're locked into like a year-long contract, even if you don't listen, you're still paying us every month, and that'd be ideal. And you can donate right now at operaboxscore.com.
Listen, that's called Patreon. That's a Patreon.
There you go.
Oh, yeah, that is, isn't it?
What do you mean? I use all of my Patreons that I'm subscribed to.
Sure.
You're also amazing. Ashley, what's our sports nugget to get things going?
Listen, usually about this time of year, I'm going to talk to you about an Arkansas football team, and I'm going to do that again today, but it's a different Arkansas football team, because the Division II NCAA National Championships were this weekend, and Harding University in tiny Searcy, Arkansas, Harding Bison, they are the national champs for Division II football.
My 37th favorite president.
It's a tiny little Church of Christ school, 4,000 students in a 20,000 person town. This offensive game, George, this is for you because you're the one that understands football. Okay. They only passed the ball 56 times all season. They rushed for 6,351 yards and 79 touchdowns. They dominated. So congrats to the Harding Bison. Shout out Searcy, Arkansas.
Those statistics are incredible. Most SEC teams pass the ball 56 times in a single weekend. Ian Wright has been a pundit for the BBC's Match of the Day show, which is the sort of recap of all the weekend's action in the English Premier League. Ian Wright, get this, he started on that show when I was in high school. He's now 60, and he's retiring from his cushy chair at
Do they not have a retirement age in the UK? They can just retire whenever they want?
He is such a delight, and it's a bittersweet moment that he is moving on to Lord knows what, because that must have been a really great gig. Let's talk some opera.
Chalk Talk on Opera Box Score.
Opera 2023, the year in review. Here we go. Fasten your seatbelts. We're going to kick it off with the best trend in opera in the 2023 calendar year. Ashley, what do you got?
Well, one of my personal favorites was seeing a whole lot of women of color making some big boss moves in the early parts of 2023. I'll even reference some specific OBS episodes for you. One of the first ones was Afton Battle making that big move from Fort Worth Opera coming to Lyric Opera of Chicago. Fort Worth's loss is Chicago's gain. So she's been doing some really incredible stuff here. She was, we talked about her a little bit in our January episode number 349. Also, big boss lady making moves all year long. The one, the only, the queen herself, Carrie Ann Otonio of Opera Delaware. She was one of my favorite interviews that we did in an episode in February, episode number 352. I encourage you to go back and check that out. She is just such a lovely human. Opera is dope. She's making it dope for the people of the first state, and it is very exciting to watch her go.
Well, speaking of people of color, I think that is actually one of the trends I've noticed in opera this year. Opera is just getting blacker. And it's so great. And I think maybe it's what's going to save opera in the end. You know, it's like Black Panther came to the movies. You know, we've had great performances from people like Ryan Speedo Green and Angel Blue, Leah Hawkins starring as Tosca in Santa Fe, Rayanne Bryce Davis, friend of the show, making her Met debut and also her Santa Fe debut this year. Obviously, Will Liverman has done so much this year. There's too much to talk about. I feel like, you know, there was some initiatives, there were some promises that were made in 2020, and we're starting to see the deliverables on those promises from 2020, and I'm not mad about it. And I think the cherry on the sundae is Rhiannon Giddens and Michael Abels' Omar winning the Pulitzer Prize and getting 2 revivals, you know, within a year of it debuting in Spoleto.
Speaking of a lot of those incredible artists that you just mentioned, that kind of dovetails into mine, which is that so far it seems like the many predictions that the recording of opera industry was nearing its end for the last 20 years. We've been reading this idea. That trend has not materialized. So the fact that there continue to be new albums released every year after year, and while many of them are not the same kind of like sterile studio products that they used to be, if anything, like that can be a really good thing. Like live performances like Will Liverman in Fire Shut Up in My Bones that won a Grammy Award. And another positive motion that I'm seeing there is like Apple Music finally trying to tackle the intractable question of how do you find which recording you are looking for if you care about who is on the recording with their improved metadata for Apple Music. Like that's not a trend yet. Amazing. Let's get it there. Yeah. If anyone needs a consultant, like I'm happy to be a part of that conversation.
I mean, honestly, between the 5 of us, we should work for Apple Music and like help them with all of the data that they're trying to add to their classical music app. Like we have that data in our brains, you know?
I mean, they bought BIS and we're definitely less expensive than BIS. My best trend of the year might be a little bit subjective to me, but I've noticed that there's an increasing, at least in a lot of the shows I saw over the past year, an increasingly interesting directorial approach to a lot of operas that I wasn't expecting.
Very kind of you.
Well, I just think that there's I was sort of puzzling my brain as to why this is happening, or at least appears to be happening to me, because we saw a lot of really well directed stuff, especially recently. I really liked the Flying Dutchman that the Lyric did, the Nose with a friend of the show, Francesca Zambello, just a few weeks ago. Lots of shows like that where there seems to be this focus on artistic intent on the production side of things that I feel like has been missing from a lot of mainstream American opera companies for a long time. And I think part of that is this pandemic shift where there was a sudden realization that new audiences actually want to see stories that are engaging to them, and that requires a strong director's perspective. I also think that this was the first full year where we weren't really seeing a lot of pandemic restrictions in rehearsals and in performances, so we could start to see a lot more coherent visions coming across that way. And I'm honestly really here for it. I really like Lyric Opera Chicago. But I do not think of them first when I'm thinking of well-directed shows sometimes. But I was pleasantly surprised several times throughout the season. Yenufo was another highlight in that regard.
Weston, if we continue to like accentuate the positive, moving from best trend to just good news in general, it sounds like a lot of those pandemic commitments, to diversity are still sticking around, and that's something that you are going to hype.
Okay, so we're switching categories. Now this is the best news item of 2023? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I got a best news item here, and it kind of bounces off, I think, what Oliver was talking about with more people of color being represented, a lot more new operas being represented. I think it's almost not really a good news item, but I liked seeing that North Carolina radio station getting embarrassed for for its attempt to roll back some of the progress that had been made.
To cancel the Met.
They'll make an appearance later in the segment. We'll learn all about it.
Oh, good. I'm so excited. But I'm seeing a lot of, with every move towards progress, you see a lot of reactionary pushback online. And this is some of the most consistent mainstream pushback to the pushback that I've seen. And that one story just made me feel so good that in many ways, it feels like the older conservative audiences win a lot in opera. And it was nice to see the public speak up and say, no, play the new operas, play the operas with controversial content, play the operas that are politically charged. This is important. This is what it's about. And I really love that.
Play the opera in Spanish because
exactly. People
because there was something
Spanish,
so scandalous about.
enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Perish the thought.
Matt, what was your good news?
Good news for me, it has quite a local flavor, and it was Lisette Oropesa finally making her lyric opera of Chicago debut in Daughter of the Regiment, and it was an absolute star turn. It felt like watching an artist who has been very hyped for many years and who is just truly at the top of her game live up to every expectation that I had for her. Just knock curveballs and fastballs and everything straight out of the park. High notes galore. She sounded incredible. Her French was beautiful. She was funny. She was spunky. She really made that production sing. And it was also nice to get to see her alongside an old favorite, Larry Brownlee, and just to see how his artistry has continued to develop and how comfortable he is on stage in a role like Tonio, who doesn't have a lot of personality on the page, but really has to on stage for it to be an interesting opera.
Oh, it sounds like you took a favorite performance category and wedged it into the good news category, man.
Well, what is a performance if not news?
Mine is also performance centric good news, and that would be the acknowledgement that friend of the show Catherine Lewick is the reigning queen of the night at the Metropolitan Opera. Another story came out just from this past week in her doing the family performance, the abridged English language version at the Met, which aired on the radio broadcast on Saturday. But she had already broken the record performing that role more than 54 times now on the Met stage. I think that's she has the record for being the queen of the night, and she is certainly my
That's over
queen.
200 Fs.
Yeah.
My good news is also about performance, but this is more unscripted performance. The Extinction Rebellion protests that happened at Les Mis and Tannhäuser more recently, that is for real. That is beautifully crafted theater. It is impactful. It is important. Look, think about a recent interview that opera director Katie Mitchell, who's English, did with The Guardian, I believe it was, saying that all her work now, and she's directed operas, oratorios, plays, all her work is going to be addressing climate chaos. Because as she says, that is the big issue of our time right now. And as an artist, that is the only thing she can do to help fight this fight. I have nothing but kudos and credit to Extinction Rebellion, and I want to see more of that happen.
Okay, this is where we get more into sports radio territory here because I disagree with you.
Good, I'm glad to hear it.
I think that it's very dangerous to do a protest like that in this day and age of gun violence and terrorism. How are the audience, and remember who's at the opera,
right?
How is this audience supposed to know? The show stopping and people don't know what's going on. They hear something happening somewhere in the audience and they turn the house lights up and everybody's looking for the exit. How's the audience supposed to know that what's happening is a peaceful protest?
Well, they have visuals for a start, which they use. I don't see how people...
I've just heard from audiences that they were horrified when that happened at Tannhäuser. Horrified. And people were looking for the exits and trying to get out of there as fast as possible.
Climate chaos is horrific. Yes, you're absolutely right. And people are like now paying attention, like really paying attention. People with money, people with power.
Are they though, or do they feel victimized by it? Like, I question how effective it is at the end of the day. Frankly,
I don't know if we know yet how effective it is, but it is certainly getting people to sit up and take notice. And I see no reason that they're going to stop.
Why target opera?
Because the theater is a wasteful art form. That's why.
You work in opera. We all work in opera.
Yes, and one of my commitments to this art form is to budget and reuse and repurpose things in a way that takes into account environmental sustainability.
We can move on to the rest of the good news.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
The National Institute of Health is doing a lot of neuro brain development studies, specifically with classical music and opera. There was actually a publication that came out in August of this year. Some doctors at UC Berkeley used computer models to try to reconstruct a piece of music from brain activity that was elicited in listeners. This is going to be great for a number of things. It's going to help people with cognitive regeneration. It's going to help people with communication, developmental delays. There are a number of ways in which music and its electrical activity within the brain can serve a number of disorders in humans. And I'm really excited that the NIH is using specifically classical music and opera to help really drive this study.
Thank you for that. Let's go over to the bad news. And Matt, you'll want to start with Extinction Rebellion.
Extinction of a sort, unfortunately, and it is that budgetary woes abound. I mean, we have covered ad nauseum the kerfuffle around English National Opera and Arts Council of England. The Met is not doing so great, including their guild. COT having to cancel Plate, and in general across the industry, numbers are not back to where they were pre-pandemic, and they weren't great then. So we might be in for a couple of white knuckle years here. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, I would say I agree with that. Obviously, there's a lot of big ones. Numbers are also looking pretty scary and at Bayreuth. I would say I'm not so scared about, opera in general, but a lot of these sort of grand opera institutions are the ones that are really feeling the hit right now as, as audiences fail to rebound and donors fail to open their purses quite as readily as they used to. The one that really gets me, I think, is the sort of the extreme reduction in Chautauqua Opera, just because of the historic significance of Chautauqua as an institution in the opera world. Yeah. I think we could talk about that for a long time and in detail, and we have this year. Just check any of our previous podcasts. So I think my one sort of bad news, it's maybe not quite as bad because it's on to bigger and better things, but I'm very sad about Lydia Yankovskaya leaving Chicago Opera Theater.
Yeah, that's true.
We have talked about it before, but she has really done a lot to raise the profile of the Second City's second opera company. And I think that, I'm really going to miss her. I'm glad that she's staying on in some capacity. But I think that CSO should hire her to replace Riccardo Muti as soon as possible, or else we're going to miss out on her before too long. Oh, that'd be amazing.
Crazy.
There's not a chance in hell they'll do that, but I wish.
Yeah, the English National Opera moving to Manchester is definitely one of the worst things I think has happened to England and to National and to opera. I don't understand it. I don't like it. It's going to end in tears. It made me also think much earlier in the year, of course, the King's Singers had that debacle in Florida. Do you remember that? Where they were doing a concert and then they were canceled because one of them is quite rightly openly, proudly gay. And so they were punished for that. And this gig was it's just so despicable.
A couple of my bad news items. Definitely the cancellation of Plate. I'm dovetailing from what Matt said. That's my opera. I love that opera so much. And I was so excited for Chicago audiences to finally see it. And that's not happening. And on top of which, friend of the show, Gary Wado, was supposed to be the conductor for that. So he's also out one gig. one of my least favorite stories of this year was when the Met Orchestra took a stand against Natalie Stutzmann when she was doing a preview. She was previewing the new Magic Flute production and talked about how the orchestra pit was going to be raised, that the orchestra could really be a part of the show. And they are actively part of the show if you saw it, So that's what she was talking about. But it was misconstrued very uncharitably, and it made it sound like she was saying that the orchestra doesn't know what's happening on stage, that they're not engaged, which is not what she said. But it was, I think, really a bad look for the Met instrumentalists. And that profile of Angela Georgiou that came out about the rehearsal of Tosca and how chaotic she was in that rehearsal process when she was like arriving and, they had already had this production, then she didn't care for it. And she was trying to reblock it and restage it and change things around and to fit how she wanted the opera to go. And then later on that day, the day the story was published, she withdrew from the production because she was sick. Apparently.
She unfortunately had COVID and had to withdraw.
Yeah.
And we were missed the, we were all denied her grand return to that stage.
And then there was that story that happened around the same time of Sonia Yoncheva getting into a fight. I forget, on Twitter maybe it was, or Facebook, with somebody who was commenting on her performance, and maybe it was about her phrasing in Norma, and she's like, "How dare you, whatever, dislike my phrasing?" And so she dropped out of Norma, which is like, it was a really hard double bill. She was supposed to be doing Fedora and then shortly after Norma, which is something that Maria Callas.
She was just getting ready for the Callas 100 a couple months early.
Yeah.
She was just prepping. She was getting her steps in before she really had to dedicate herself on the calendar.
Did Sonia Yoncheva make herself the Bête Noire? Is she ever coming back? We haven't gotten a season announcement yet, but maybe she's not coming back.
There were a lot of what I would consider gross news stories that came out this year, which is why I am starting a new segment called the first annual OBS Gross Awards for the grossest news items of the year. And the nominees are, first, in September, we reported in episode 383 about David Daniels emerging from wherever and whatever slimy rock he was hiding under to let people know he was getting contracts in Europe. And somehow everybody that I admired and respected was weirdly okay with it. Not everybody, but a good chunk of people. But at any rate, David Daniels coming back. Gross. No, thank you. The next nominee is from October. It was in episode number 386. Deb Proctor, who is the head of programming over at WCPE in North Carolina. Weston might have mentioned this earlier. Right. Deb Proctor let Jesus do the opera programming and decided to ditch a bunch of the Met broadcasts because the Lord led her to let him be the guide for the programming. So,
and punish the wokes.
Yes, no thank you. And finally, the final nominee in this category is literally every Anna Netrebko story that we reported on in the year 2023. Episode 357 that we did in March, where her manager was whining because somebody talked mess about her in Die Welt magazine. In August, episode number 378 is where she sues Peter Gelb and the Met for all of the whatever that she decided to sue them for. Also in August number 380, she got a concert canceled because of people's strong feelings about Russia. What a shocker there. And then finally, episode number 384 in September, the Berlin Intendant started showing support for her and her Macbeth because she's so misunderstood. So at any rate, I just don't know if we can pick a winner for the Gross Awards, but there they are.
I love how you came with the episode numbers for every single Anna Netrebko story that we did this year. That's going to
be some in the weeds for our listeners if they want to go back to try to figure out what our numbering system is. But but she's made her return. I mean, she just made her role debut as Elizabeth in Don Carlo. And she got great reviews. So for what it's worth, she
and
continues.
Again, I say gross.
So do you want to name a winner of the OBS 2023 Grossy?
I mean, I think the Grossy Award goes to us because we're all the losers because we have to sit through this stuff.
Beautifully played. Exactly. More best and worst from 2023 coming up in just 1 second.
Opera Class, Sports Radio Crass, This is Opera Box Score.
We're back to take a quick little break and talk about the best sports story of 2023 before we get you back into the opera. We're going to kick it off with Ashley Hardgrave.
I'm going to amend this category from best to biggest. So the biggest sports stories of the year. I've got two. I've got a boo and a yay. The boo I will begin with, and it is the redrawing, gutting of the college sports map, punishing all collegiate sports teams because Texas wanted to join the SEC in football. We had a Power Five when it came to football. Now we sort of have a Hardy Four. But there's a really great interview with UCLA's Chip Kelly where he gives a proposition for separating football from all of the other collegiate sports, because that's really what's driving this, is that men's NCAA football is really what is pushing people. They're all flocking and bottlenecking to conferences like the SEC. So that's my boo story, is that we've been gutting these maps. The yay story is that we have significantly more women's sports making national headlines. Hooray, hooray. We've got Angel Reese, the rock star over at LSU. We've got Caitlin Clark setting all-time records. She's a University of Iowa athlete, but she is setting all-time records for any athlete in any collegiate sport. It's mind-blowing. Nebraska set an attendance record for any women's sport ever at a women's volleyball game this year. They had 92,000 people there. So it's been really exciting to see these little moments in women's sports history. First of all, shattering records of women or men's sports history, but also being the leading headline for ESPN and Sports Illustrated. It's wonderful to see.
Oliver Camacho, your best or biggest sports story for 2023.
I mean, everybody knows my brand here. I'm going to talk a little bit about tennis. And I think the story of the year is the rise and fall of Carlos Alcaraz. It was his year to lose. I think he peaked at Wimbledon. He beat Djokovic in a thrilling final. And then he just never refound his form. He had some good results, but that's June or whatever. That's July. And he did not find, that form again. And so at this point, we have to say that it's a mental game for him. And unfortunately, Novak Djokovic is the clear champion when it comes to having a mental game. But it did make way for us to learn about players like Jannik Sinner, who is an extremely exciting player to watch in 2024.
Matt Cummings, sports for you in 23.
I mean, definitely big news that this was the first year of tennis without Serena Williams. But never fear, we have another GOAT who is back on the scene, and that is the return of Simone Biles. So get ready, everybody. The Olympics are coming, and I will have something to say in sports talk.
Weston, I shudder to think how you might answer this question.
Well, I mean, legally speaking, I am from Alabama, so I'm only allowed to know one thing in sports. And let me just check my notes. It just says Roll Tide with a question mark. I do have one other sports thing, though. My TikTok feed has recently led me to a sport that is almost as entertaining as the Tide rolling over Auburn during the Iron Bowl, even though it was a bit of a nail biter for a while there. I have been served, for some reason, video after video after video of soapbox races sponsored by Red Bull. And it's just a lot of people going down in goofy little carts that are very poorly constructed, that have very funny helmets and very funny sort of cardboard and styrofoam constructions, and they all wipe out hilariously, and it might be the best sport ever made.
Amazing. Not what I thought you were going to say, although, Ashley, you're going to explain to us what Roll Tide actually means.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, saints of the church, boys and girls, dear listeners, you are going to hear from people who have come from the state of Alabama a phrase called Roll Tide, and that is their general greeting, rallying cry for their University of Alabama Crimson Tide. Think of it as shalom or aloha. It's a greeting. It's a celebratory remark. It's all sorts of things.
It's not a mating call, is it? So.
Actually, yes.
It can be.
Cases,
it can be.
In some cases, it absolutely
Roll
is.
Tide!
That's
my new worst of 2023.
That is the worst.
Best sports story for me, of course, was Wolverines coach Jim Harbaugh on the sidelines for the last 3 games of the season because of alleged sign stealing. Let me just say this. The Wolverines will gladly play the role of villain in the Big Ten and the college football playoff. Weston, need I remind you that the next time you and I lock eyes, someone will be in tears.
I remember, George. And it's probably going to be you, George. I'm sorry.
Lots more opera coming your way for 2023. We're going to kick it off again with the best performances witnessed live in the theater. Ashley Hardgrave, set us up. What was your best performance of the year?
It absolutely has to be grounded at Washington National Opera and the Kennedy Center. I mean, you got 300 LCD screens with incredible projections of fighter pilots and air scenes and drones, and the production values were outstanding. The performance and the storytelling and the direction were what really moved you. It was also about a month into the current conflict that we see on the other side of the world, the newest one. And so it was very poignant to be watching the evolution of American warfare told in this art form that we love so much, in a beautiful space in our nation's capital. So it was poignant for a lot of things about who and where we are in time, but it was also just beautiful music making and beautiful storytelling, and I will never forget it.
Oliver, what was your best performance of the year?
So many contenders with performances from Opera Philadelphia and the Boston Early Music Festival, all the performances I see in Chicago, and Santa Fe. And I think the thing that has stuck with me the most since I've seen it, and the thing I still think about, is the production of Pelléas et Mélisande at Santa Fe Opera.
Really?
Yeah. And while I was watching it, I didn't understand it, but I knew that there were things that I would want to think about later on. And the more I think about it and look at the images from that show and remember the performances, the more I'm gutted about it. And it was such a stark and nihilistic interpretation of that show, with ideas about climate change, actually, and about the future, and about violence towards women, domestic violence. And I just remember Samantha Hankey being dragged around on stage by Zachary Nelson, who I know is a very nice guy, but I remember that scene so much, and it still makes me emotional to think about it, because she had so much dignity while she was being abused, because
awesome.
She knew it was going to happen. She wasn't surprised about it, and it harkens back to the opening scene of the show, where she's just kind of numb and doesn't express any kind of joy or fear or anything. Well, she expresses fear, but she just seems very okay with what's happening to her. That's her personality. She knows that meeting this guy is going to be bad news for her, but it's just her cycle. It's the story of her life, and that's what she come to expect. Misery. So anyway, also it had Hugh Montague Rendell, and he is incredible. I want all of you to look him up and watch his content and keep your eye on him, because he is he's a very, very special artist.
Matt, what do you got?
I even with my Monday evening quarterback on it, I still don't think I could say enough good things about Yennefer at Lyric Opera of Chicago. It was simply one of the best things I have ever seen on stage. It's an opera I have long loved the score to, and have really wanted to see live in person, and it just doesn't get done enough, even though I really think it should. It's an incredibly searing drama, and the score is at this interesting crossroads of romantic and modern, where I really think that there's a lot for everyone there, even though it maybe doesn't seem like the most approachable, just because of how complicated the family tree aspects of it are. But the music is so powerful, and just provides a really powerful canvas for truly great performances, which in this case were Lisa Davidston, who you can't get through a best of 2023 episode without mentioning Lisa Davidston, because it is, the voice is just the real deal. It is a voice that you feel in your body more than you hear it with your ears. It just completely envelops you, and the resonance and the vibration of it, you become one with her sound. it's so penetrating. And just to get to see Nina Stemma's next phase of her career as she moves into the character mezzo roles and like can still be an absolute force of nature. I was bowled over.
And Weston, did you also have a Chicago-based show?
I did, yeah. I really, feels like cheating because it happened like 2 weeks ago, but I loved The Nose, that Chicago Opera Theater did. I think it was a great production. Nos. I love the opera. The Nose has been one of my favorites for a long, long time. It's just it's a great introduction to, atonal music writing. It's a lot of fun. It's hard to translate, which is why it rarely gets done. But man, they did their darndest. And it was also great to like see, a company like COT throwing itself at something that was genuinely a challenge, coming from, places that are not Chicago in the deep South, the deep and abiding, not wanting to do anything super unfamiliar or super challenging, is something that I feel like I've gotten more than used to in my opera. And I think The Nose was such a philosophical breakaway from that. And with some great performances in there, Alexei Bogdanov was phenomenal. Lydia Yankovskaya, of course, did her last, conducting session as music director with it, and it was an amazing performance. I did feel like I was kind of cheating because I was like, am I just like a goldfish? I can only remember the last show I watched. So I looked through all the other shows of the year, and Yenufa was up there too, but like I was like, I think that really is it. I did want to mention a little bonus best performance from way back, I think in March, that Oliver actually was in the same room as me for. Wasn't really an opera, but it was a performance with the Jupiter Ensemble and Léa Desandre. They sang some Vivaldi, and it was a great show. Not a complete opera, so it doesn't quite, fit on this list, but I think it was.
It's a performance. It's a performance.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought it was. Yeah. I thought it was a great show. Amazing musicality. The energy was so exciting, even with those small forces. And that's what I go to the opera for. So I'll give that one a gold star as well.
You already said it, but let me just say it in a different way about The Nose. The score is very difficult. The musicians that Chicago Opera Theater had access to at the beginning of Lydia Yankovskaya's reign or tenure would not have been able to pull that score off. But
absolutely,
after years of working with probably a lot of those musicians and knowing who in Chicago she would contract for that show, just shows how much she learned about Chicago while she was here, that she could pull an opera like that off. It was remarkable.
My 2023 in performances was the year of trying to get my whole family to go to the theater together. And my son and I, we did see Hansel and Gretel, the Richard Jones production at Lyric Opera of Chicago way back in January. But that was really it specifically for opera. Then as a family, we saw Cats, 1776, Brigadoon, Chestnuts of the American Musical Theater. I would also go on to see MJ on the national tour and at the Goodman Theater, Tommy. It's hard to pick between some phenomenal productions. That production of Tommy, which I assume is going to go to Broadway, was absolutely lights out. And Chris Jones of the Chicago Tribune also picked it as his #1 show for the year. PJ, our friend and correspondent, said it was all about the new for him in 2023. New singers, new productions, new operas like The Hours, Malcolm X, Champion, Fire Shut Up in My Bones, Florencia, and El Amazonas. Obviously all stuff in New York City at the Met. He goes on to say it's not necessarily all new to the world, but it was new to him. And of course, a giant thrill, PJ said, was finally seeing a production he's wanted to see all his life, Poulenc's Dialogues of the Carmelites. Moving over to best performances that were in HD or streaming live, I'm going to tell you right now, I gave up on streaming in 2023, and I even made a camera opera specifically to be streamed, and I still couldn't bear to watch anything else. So,
George, I didn't make it to any of the live in HDs this year, but that's just because we have PJ now, and we don't have to anymore.
It's just me then. I just want to shout out the Mozart double feature that we got from Nathalie Stutzmann conducting the Ivo van Hove production of Don Giovanni and the Simon McBurney production of The Magic Flute. Both were amazingly cast, especially Ana Maria Martinez as Donna Elvira and Federica Lombardi as Donna Anna. Those were some baller performances. And Ying Fang as Zerlina. Not much that Zerlina can do to compete with the really like showy music of Donna Elvira and Donna Anna, but she held her own in her lane. But that was such a thrilling thing to see. And we have, sort of the inside look at that show with our interview with Marcus Shields that we had earlier this year, who was an assistant to Eva van Hove. That episode is called Distraction Tactics, I think it's what it's called. So go back into the feed, or actually maybe we'll create a bonus episode for you all to hear.
Ooh,
one of my favorite
tuned.
interviews. Yeah, one of my favorite interviews from this past calendar year. And then she followed that up with the controversial orchestra raised Magic Flute, which had Erin Morley as Pamina, friend of the show, Catherine Lewick. They're all friends of the show, actually. Catherine Lewick doing her thing as Queen of the Night, and Larry Brownlee, who has entered into a new era in his performance. He has found something now where he is much more confident on. He's always had the vocal goods, but as a performer, he's a new artist. And it was very exciting to see him deliver in such a stylish version of Magic Flute with a very specific point of view from the production itself, able to fit into that type of production and do what the director was looking for and really deliver on the concept. I thought it was a really, really impressive from him.
Man, Oliver, now you and I are on the same page, name dropping the directors. Eva van Hove, Simon McBurney. These are absolute legends. Perhaps I need to revisit that HD stream. Lastly, in the performance section, these are for shows that are on video or pre-recorded. Clearly, Ashley and I were far too busy watching Ted Lasso to watch any opera pre-recorded, but here we go. But Matt Cummings, you might have something.
Mine is not a video, but it is the new Antonio Pappano set of Turandot that came out in the spring. And particularly his female cast on that album sounds incredible. Emanuela Yaho is the Liu on it. And she is like a really utility knife player. She sings all over Europe. She's recorded some on Opera Rara, but there just isn't enough evidence of like her artistry on record. So it's always good to have a little bit more. And I'm saving the best for last. Everyone on this podcast, if you've ever heard me talk before, knows how I feel about Sandra Radvanovsky. And Turandot is just such a good role for her because she can make that punishing tessitura sound like nothing, and she can sing the loud and she can sing the quiet, and she sure did. Jonas Kaufman did not come off so well as either of them, but nothing more needs to be said about that.
I also did not bother with video. I've always been an audio guy, but we had some decent recordings of some Baroque operas out of Europe, which I'm sure Oliver has much more informed opinions about. I want to give a little highlight to Lord of Cries getting a studio recording with a bunch of friends of the show. That was great. I think the best sort of solo album of the year, for my money, was probably the Michael Spires Contratenor album.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which was fantastic. And I am, I think I said when I came out, I'm not a big solo singer album kind of guy. I like to listen to operas within the context of what the composer was thinking, but vocally, the range and the intensity it's an incredible album, and I think it deserves to be pretty high up there for anybody's list for best recorded performance. I also want to give a little bonus shout out to my personal favorite album, which isn't really fully opera, even though it has the same title as one. Der Ferne Klang is a collection of it's Franz Schreker's orchestral music and songs, and it has a musical interlude from the opera Der Ferne Klang, which is very confusing, and I hate the way they named it. But it's got Matthias Goerne in it, and it's got some world premiere recordings in there. And I love Schreker, just the most hyper romantic composer ever. And it's so well recorded, beautifully engineered album. It is hard to record something with that size of an orchestra with those scale of voices, and they nailed it. It's well worth checking out.
Since the recording I listened to the most in 2023, I just discovered actually came out in 2022. That is Jupiter Ensemble, to recall Weston's
that's a good one.
performance. It's the Lea des André and Yeston Davies duet album of Handel oratorios.
Yeah, it's good.
It's so good. You'll listen to it from start to finish, and you will just be eternally in heaven. So along that vein, Harry Bickett, as we know, with the English Consort, is in this project to record everything by Handel over the next 10 years. I forget. It was one of our drill stories, but
I mean, that's not going to take long. There's only like 4 shows.
So Harry Bickett is becoming a Handel completist, and the entry for 2023 is Circe. With an amazing cast led by Emily D'Angelo, Lucy Crowe, and Daniela Mack is also friend of the show, also in the cast. So take a listen to that if you are interested in hearing a really good Circe, which actually it's been recorded quite a number of times, but there's not really a good one out there until this one.
All right, y'all, it's going to get dark for a little bit in the next couple blocks here, but don't worry. Opera Person of the Year 2023 awaits you in just a few minutes. Ashley, I want to throw it over to you. We had a lot of smackdowns. There's no such thing as a worst smackdown. There's only a best smackdown. What were some of the best smackdowns?
There were lots to celebrate this go round, and I even have episode names and numbers. So if you're a new listener to the show, you can absolutely go back and check them out. So the first one we did this year, it was going to be in March this year. It was episode number 360. If you're looking for a title, it's called Seventh Inning Stretta. And what we did is we took all of the teams that were in the NCAA men's basketball Final Four, and we pitted their fight songs against each other, and we had a showdown to see who had the big battle to the finish. It was a hoot. It's so funny. It's such a delight. I really encourage you to check it out. Then you can scroll a little bit further back forward into July, into episodes 375 through 377. We did a TKO Mozart v. Mozart v. Mozart for the best Mozart act in opera. I thought that was an incredible series of segments, even though I lost and I probably should have won. I'm just saying.
I also think it was an incredible series of segments as the winner. Spoiler alert.
As the reigning champion, Mr. Cummings. And then finally, in August, episode 379, which I believe we called Thirst Trap, featuring Hugh Montague Rindle. That was where the Women's World Cup was happening. And so what we did is we had a battle between the most famous singers for each of the teams that were in the finals of the Women's World Cup. It was a real hoot. And again, I always love battling with these gentlemen and talking technique and artistry and art form. So if you want some just good-natured, sports-themed operatic humor, those 3 Smackdowns are definitely worth a listen.
Thank you for that. Did we not even predict the finalist and the winner of the World Cup correctly based on
We
famous
absolutely did,
Just
based
saying.
on famous singers.
It's infallible. We've nailed it every time.
It really is. This
It's
is
a
the
real science.
part of the show which brings me a little bit low, I have to admit. Of course, Exit Stage Right is a repeat feature on the 2-minute drill, and of course we lost some big names in 2023. Matt, I want to start with you. Who are some folks who did in fact exit Stage Right?
One of the earlier legends that we lost in the first half of the year is the great mezzo and later soprano Grace Bunbury, who was a pioneer in one of racial equity in opera casting. She famously made an iconic debut at Bayreuth playing Venus and Tannhäuser, and had an ovation that shook that house to its foundation, pretty much. Just like cannot be overstated how important her contributions to the repertoire are. And also in terms of opera criticism and opera love, James Jordan, the founder of Parterre Box, was a huge loss in 2023. It started as an e-zine back in the 90s, and it became I would say, probably the foremost, blog, chat room, comment section, nest of vipers about opera on the web, where all of the people in the know exchange barbs, exchange takes, picked apart performances, the good and the bad. And that's just a huge loss.
I just want to update everybody on Parterre. I reached out to Harry Rose, who is now part of a small steering committee to keep Parterre going. So the future of Parterre is in the hands of friend of the show, Harry Rose, and his colleagues, Chris Corwin, Nick Scholl, and Joel Rosen. Those are the main members of Parterre's future.
We definitely lost some other folks this year who were tremendous losses for the opera and the music community, and I'm really proud of the extended tributes we did for each of these folks. In August, we lost Renata Scotto, and we did Matt put together a really incredible tribute for her, and that's episode number 380. And then finally, last week's episode 396 this December, we lost Marlena Malice, which is an incredible sad, heart-wrenching, devastating blow to the opera and the singing teaching communities, and also gave me yet another opportunity to cry on the airwaves about an experience with her. So, but both of those women were really important to our art form, and they will be missed.
And just to dovetail on important artists who were also known as teachers. I would say that Virginia Zayani
absolutely.
had a long list of famous singers that were her students at some point or another, including a friend of the show, Eileen Perez.
My sort of big highlighted exit stage right is not a person, but rather an institution. Of course, not as tragic as the loss of a person, but I think just as impactful when you think about the legacy of what Opera News represented before its untimely demise earlier this year, and absorption and onlineification of whatever it will be going forward. Opera News, maybe not the most trusted source of information about, Met style shows because they were, under the hand of the Met. And a lot of people thought that they kind of represented kind of an old school establishment kind of reporting on opera, which is, I think, fair. But at the same time, I remember when I told, my father, who is of a certain generation who grew up reading Opera News his entire life, that it was going away. And I remember just like the shock on his face that this institution had fallen. And I think that, the loss of Opera News was a lesson for people who want to keep opera going. That it is not just the opera companies we should be concerned about. We should also be concerned about the educational aspect. We should be concerned with the health of institutions like Opera News or, Parterre Box even, or Opera Box Score, dare I say, to sustaining and pushing the form forward through criticism and commentary. And I think it was a really big loss. And I don't think that that's necessarily felt by everyone, but I know that within the next, few decades, we're going to be missing a publication like Opera News.
Opera News had some stats in it occasionally, and crunching the numbers again, another segment that we have on 2 Minute Drill. When I think back in 2023 about surprising numbers that I came across, for me, it was finding out that Anthony Freud of Lyric Opera of Chicago was Chicago's highest paid leader of an arts not-for-profit in Chicago with a salary of just shy of $750,000. I choked on my English breakfast tea when I read that. I was
on your beans and toast. You choked.
My baked beans on toast. That's exactly right.
It might have just
yes.
been the beans and toast, George.
It could have been that. Yeah, I thought that was high. And of course, he moves. He's retiring now. Also in 2023, there's a gap at the top of Lyric, and that was a surprising amount of money. I thought that was heading his way. Ashley, what do you got? What's some surprising numbers from the past year?
Well, I pulled two figures just to sort of highlight two ends of the size spectrum of opera houses and opera companies. And so the first number that I have for you is $400,000, which is the amount that Tulsa Opera said it basically needed to have per show and did not have. So it canceled 2 of the shows in their season, one last fall, and then another one has been canceled for May. And so there's $400,000 there. And then there's the figure of $30 million. And that is the amount that the Metropolitan Opera withdrew from their endowment in the very first parts of 2023 to right the ship. So this is our spectrum for, well, and also let's talk about the fact that the Met has that much in their endowment to pull out to balance things around. And it's really only 10% of their endowment. So yeah, from needing $400,000 to put on a show to $30 million to righting the ship of the biggest house in America.
Wow, those are, 400K is almost like a rounding error to the Met at this point.
400K is an Anna Trebko settlement, I think you mean.
Yeah.
Oliver.
What?
In response to Tay-Tay.
Oh, sorry. You were queuing me up. So I just wanted to include this category at the end of this show because, Time magazine named Taylor Swift as Person of the Year. And great for her. Like, I have no compunction with that.
Oliver on record as not trying to anger the Swifties.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
She's a singer. She's a vocalist. So that's a good thing.
So I mean, a musician being named music person of the year is a good thing. I'll just say that, regardless of who it is. It could have been,
and especially given the fact that she's known for running her private jet, and we know how much Oliver hates the environment from earlier in this episode.
So anyway, you're going to get the Swifties mad now, and they will cancel us. But I just saw a bunch of activity on social media, like people that I respect and, people who are my colleagues get all up in arms about this. Like, what did she do? It's like, you're not paying attention to what she's doing. Don't pretend that
she restarted the global economy. That's what she did. She brought Chicago's tourism back with her weekend of concerts alone. And American cities need to be grateful for her.
Yeah.
And she did it through the power of the sung human voice, right?
Yeah.
Let us acknowledge that.
And the power of mediocre songwriting.
Oh, Weston.
Seriously.
Dude,
you really are trying to
I'm
get
going
for
it.
it.
Just stepping in
I
it
knew you
left
were
and right.
Dude,
Yeah.
yikes.
I knew you were trouble when you walked in, Weston.
No, seriously, Weston, you don't know the power of the Swifties. That's not even.
They're
going to
find you.
I do. I'm on TikTok.
Yeah. So anyway, I just thought that we should have our own, since there is obviously an opera personality would never be considered for Person of the Year in Time magazine, that we should be the journalistic organization that names the 2023 Person of the Year. So, who wants to go first to nominate somebody? Weston, since you're obviously not.
I'll go
first.
first.
Swift,
I mean,
so.
I'll go with the Taylor Swift of the Chicago Operaland scene, Lydia Yankovskaya. She will not be part of the Chicagoland opera scene for long, apparently, but one can only hope. Lydia Yankovskaya really was a force to be reckoned with. I remember the first show I ever saw her conduct. I could tell the leaps and bounds that the orchestra was making, that the singers were making, the adventurous nature of each season going forward, her undeniable charisma, her complete and total dedication to her art, while still managing to be a mother, see a previous episode from the Opera Box Score about that, to being a mentor, to like encouraging new artists through the, I'm blanking on the name of the program, new composers in Chicago. Vanguard Initiative, thank you. And really just in what was really not a very long tenure at Chicago Opera Theater, leaving such a huge impact on the Chicago classical music scene. And it really kind of blows my mind that she was able to do all that, and she's still, still quite young as an artist and very much an up and comer, and she's going to be very huge very soon. So even if she doesn't win Opera Person of the Year 2023, she will very soon, within the next few years.
Can we just say Person of the Year and stop qualifying everything as opera? Because that's basically our.
That's fair. That's fair. We have that authority. This is the person.
The person.
Matt?
All right, I'm going to nominate Ryan Speedo Green, who this year has been singing all over the place, not least in his highly acclaimed and very much buzzed about turn in Champion. He also won this year's Beverly Sills Award, which I've always said is the Golden Globes to the OBS Person of the Year, Oscar. And just anytime we are talking about Ryan Speedo Green, and the conversation turns to his own personal narrative of finding opera and music as a troubled youth, I just think that that's a great story to have representation on this stage and as a part of this industry and as a part of this art form, and that there are very few people who make a better spokesperson for what opera can be in the 21st century than Ryan Speedo Green.
Okay, Ashley, you have somebody you want to nominate for Person of the Year?
It is. It's a little bit abstract, but would it be a comment for me if it weren't a little bit off kilter? My nomination for Person of the Year is the opera goer, the audience member under the age of 50.
This is like when Time said that you were the Person of the Year.
Like a mirror was in the place of the picture.
100%. These are folks that are newer to the party often. Some of them are like us, but I'm starting to see more and more people that have never been to operas before that are starting to come. Those representations and people like Ryan Speedo Green are that sort of representation on stage is driving younger audiences to come in. Their interest in their ticket sales are starting to shape the way that companies are doing programming decisions and casting. The diversity promises of 2020 are manifesting now, and it's bringing in audiences that are younger, that are more diverse. That representation absolutely does matter. And they are the people that have shaped a lot of opera this year and will continue to shape opera moving forward.
Well, I just want to talk about one person and their year, and that would be friend of the show, Will Liverman, who made...
Oh, wait, you win. You win, Oliver.
He made a role debut as Pelias in Pelias et Melisande at LA Opera. He had his own opera produced, composed, The Factotum at Lyric Opera Chicago.
It was so good. It was so good.
He returned to Opera Philadelphia to star in a world premiere, 10 Days in the Madhouse, by Renee Orth. He had a pretty high-profile performance singing Malcolm X at the Met. A new recording of his original music came out called the Dunbar Sessions, which is definitely writing that, just that narrow space that he's crafted for himself between classical and, gospel and, rhythm and blues. Like, it's just a very weird line that he's sort of drawn in that space that he fits into perfectly. And to keep it very on brand for us, don't forget that he also sang the national anthem at the men's final of the U.S. Open. That's right. He sang the Black national anthem. So he's had a pretty incredible year. And I think he should be the winner of the inaugural OBS Person of the Year. But maybe George has somebody else.
I'm just waiting for Will Liverman, forget time, to be on the cover of like Rolling Stone magazine or to do like an ad for Rolex or something. Like, let's get some real money going for that guy. You know what I mean? Just like forget the opera thing. This is super tricky for me. Obviously, I've got to nominate a director or producer and fight my corner. I was thinking about, Peter Sellers, who I got to meet at the Opera America conference, which was just a total highlight of my 2023. And maybe think of David Devan, of course, and all the work that he has done at Opera Philadelphia. And now he's stepping down. I was convinced that he was going to move on back to his native Canada and start to run the Canadian Opera Company when he moved on from Opera Philadelphia. That does not seem to be the case. So I think my nominee is kind of straightforward, predictable, and completely earned, which is Barry Kosky. He has had a yet another huge year, and what he brings is just consistency. He has done so many shows, of course, a long time association with the Komische Oper, fighting the corner for Jews and Judaism in this business of the performing arts and in storytelling through music. He's had a fantastic year, winner of the International Opera Award for Best Director for 23. Barry Kosky would be my nom. Lastly,
you can really
PJ,
tell that you didn't go to see any live in HD broadcasts because of that nomination, George.
PJ has a nomination for Person of the Year as well, and it's his own son. He says, hey, I was able to introduce opera to a few first-timers, and including his son Finn, who has now seen 4 operas by the age of 13, which I think is pretty darn
solid.
fabulous.
I mean, that goes into Ashley.
That's really Ashley's Person of the Year, yeah.
Yeah, proud of that.
Well, as the creative consultant of Opera Box, I'm gonna go ahead
and declare yourself the victor.
Of course.
In true Oliver
I'm
Camacho
consulting
fashion.
all of you to agree with me that Will Liverman is the Opera Person of the Year, or just the Opera Box Score Person of the Year.
Good call, bad call on Opera Box Score.
Time to wrap up the last show of 2023. Gosh, it's been a total blast from the past, y'all. So great to have the entire team here once again as we finish up in 2023. Good call, bad call. It's the last one of the year. We're going to kick it off. Matt Cummings.
I've got some holiday road trips coming up for me in the next days. Well, at least one of them will be in the past by the time you're actually hearing this. But what better way to pass the time on your holiday road trips than by listening to the only memoir whose length can be measured in terms of complete ring cycles. Coming in at 3 complete ring cycles is My Name is Barbara at 48 hours. You can drive all the way across the continental United States and still have content.
Weston Williams.
Well, I was thinking, well, what's a good call for the whole year? And I was thinking, and I was looking back at all my answers, and I realized there was a fairly large hole for like spring into summer. And I was like, why didn't I see anything? Oh yeah, I got married. So that's my good call, is getting married and walking down the aisle to the violin solo from Einstein on the Beach.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, that's operatic at least. So
Yeah.
keeping it on brand too.
Gosh, your wife puts up with a lot. Ashley, what do you got?
We're going to round out the year with the series that I have done for the entire month of December, which is Ashley's holiday album recommendations. This is the third and final for 2023. This is the 30th anniversary year of what is my personal favorite holiday album ever, which is Boyz II Men's Christmas Interpretations. It came out in 1993. It was the second album from the magical group that is Boyz II Men. It's almost all new tracks, but the one thing that is not new is what might be my favorite cover of Silent Night ever. It's an incredible album. It's great to have on in the background while you're wrapping presents, hanging out with friends, trying not to argue politics with your relatives. So I encourage you, Boyz II Men's Christmas Interpretations.
Oliver Camacho.
My good call, bad call is sort of like meh. So it's a meh call.
Okay.
As I expected, the season finale of Gilded Age Season 2 did culminate in opening night at the Metropolitan Opera. And I really loved this series this year. I thought especially Cynthia Nixon gave an incredible performance this year. But the finale was, in fact, at the new Metropolitan Opera. And they showed us the boxes, they showed us, the lobbies, and they showed us, beautiful costumes. We didn't get to see the stage. We didn't get to see a performance, which was a bummer. And I felt like, if you're going to spend all this money on the show, give us a set. Please let us see some opera,
Of course.
At least work in the Faustspiel house joke, which is just...
Well, it was Faust in Italian, so.
I have a good call which hasn't even happened yet before you've listened to the show, which is Festival of Nine Lessons and Carols from King's College, Cambridge. For me, this is the absolute core of Christmas. It is some of the best singing in the world. Do not miss. Sunday, December 24th, 9 a.m. Central Time. You're going to check your local listings. I guarantee you it will give you everything you want from the season, and do not miss whatever the world premiere commissioned carol is this year. I cannot wait to find out. That is it for this week's edition, and this year in America's Talk Radio Show about opera. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, get your voice heard, and find links to stuff we've talked about at our website, operaboxscore.com. That is also where you can put your money where our mouths are. Give back to the OBS on the Support the Team page. Your announcer is Norm Waddell, your creative consultant is Oliver Camacho, and your audio editor is Weston Williams. For co-hosts Matt Cummings and Ashley Hardgrave, I'm George Cedarquist, asking you to continue the conversation about opera as you struggle to stay up to midnight in your time zone. We're back with all new shows starting on Thursday, January 11th, but look for a bonus episode in your feed between now and the 12th day of Christmas. Plus, you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more listicles. Join us.